Hello, everyone. This is episode 20 of the Justin Files podcast, a member of the Broken Jars network. We don't have any news, right? So we're just going straight into the topic of names. We're discussing names
the
and
demo of
magical
the
stuff.
card game and
Oh yeah,
Dragon
okay.
Team is going to Dragon Con if anyone is going.
Yeah,
That's the only
there's
one.
new stuff with the Harry Dresden card game, and Jim confirms he's going to Dragon Con 2016. That's all of our news. We have Andreas with us,
Hey,
who has already been talking, Justin,
Hello again.
and Stark returning once more. Say hi, Stark.
Hello.
Okay.
Yay, it's Stark.
All right. And
Hello.
unfortunately, Alex couldn't join us today because of scheduling conflicts. But, so, discussion on names. I was kind of thinking let's start with like real world experiences with having names. Like if you have to go by changing names or you went by a nickname for a really long time and so your real name is kind of weird. Do you guys have experiences with that? And if you want to talk about it.
I've never really had a nickname, to be honest. I've always been known by my first name, pretty much.
I have a nickname, and it's actually come up a couple of times, like randomly. Just people will start to call me that because I have a French last name. As often as not, though, I get my name confused with others. So people will call me by my brother's name, whether advertently or inadvertently. I'll get called by near misses and that sort of thing. So I don't have nicknames per se, but there is ambiguity at times about how my name is and how it translates overseas, of all things too. So it's interesting, probably a little bit different.
Stark, do you have any comments? Because we call you Stark.
Yeah. Well, Stark's part of my name. I kind of take Harry's approach with that
First
and
name
be
Edward.
careful with what name she go by. Don't say that. Don't say that, man. I'm already scared shitless of J.R.R. Martin or George R. R. Martin because someone named Stark fucked with him or something. Because man, I never want to meet him. I'm able to dagger and kill me, but. Back on topic with it, I've had a lot of nicknames in my life, a lot of crazy aliases that I've gone by, ones that I came up with, others have come up with. It's kind of all over the place. But in any case, it's interesting. It's certainly interesting as an idea to be referred to as something or someone other than what you grow up being called as. Like, for me, just a brief example, in my own household growing up, they never referred to me by my first name. They just talked to me directly without saying, like, oh, blah, 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 go take care of this. So it was kind of weird, and I definitely understood the power of names, at least, because when it's used, you damn well know you've done something wrong.
When your full name is used, it's like, oh shit, oh no,
Yeah.
I got fucked up.
Oddly, when I was a kid, they never did the full name means you're in trouble thing. But it took me until I was about 8 to realize that my uncle's name wasn't Eric. It was, in fact, Leslie. And it's just like, holy shit, why do we call him Eric? It's because then I realized that my grandfather's name is also Leslie. And that's just like, why did you do that then? But
I just realized that actually with having nicknames that, when I play online games, especially when I play World of Warcraft, it's very common, and I actually respond as if it's my name to my online handle there.
yeah, and there's I've done things like that too in MMOs, and I certainly respond to the title of director now, which is a little weird. I've also gone by my middle name sometimes when I was taking Japanese language classes. My middle name is Japanese, so just call me that. And so a bunch of people didn't know my first name, and it was weird. But
Was
Yeah,
it Baka? Was it Baka?
no.
If I remember right, the first couple of shows we actually played around with calling you by your middle name, and it just never stuck. So
Yeah, you guys are kind of had issues pronouncing it. But
what, us white people, we're fine. Like we're just the paragons of other cultures. So.
They just need to copy us some more.
yeah, it'd be actually really weird to hear Andres say it, but
It's sorry to interject real quick. So it's fun that you bring up the online handle because that reminds me of the the years that I spent playing MMOs, where I kind of identify that. And then also talking about how your uncle was named Eric, it reminded me I have a friend, his full name is Merlin Jed. Like, that's his middle name, and he
That's
goes by
so
Jed.
cool.
Right. He goes by Jed, though, because his dad was named Merlin or his grandfather was named Merlin. And I'm like, you're a D&D player, kid. Merlin was a gift from your parents.
I would refuse
you
to
don't
use
go
Jed.
by it.
I would be like, Merlin. He's like, no, just call
Right.
me Jed. No. Your name Merlin, I'm using it.
Right. And so it's just one of those things where it's like, well, yeah, it's an awesome name for anybody. Like, even Director Alex would love to be called Merlin, but, he goes by Jed because that was his dad's name. And it's like, no, dude, you're missing it.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's
I
like
just realized
basically my
that-
grandparents were lazy, and it's like, okay, let's copy paste a name, and then we'll do something. Yeah, and Jim Butcher himself has said that when he was a kid, he was called Jimmy, but now he goes by Jim. So if you tried to summon him with the name Jimmy Butcher, it wouldn't work. And that's this concept of names change throughout your life. And I changed my name when I got married, and so this is like I had that experience as well of having to.
And
like,
he's
change
actually
all the
named
documents
James,
and
right?
stuff.
That was his
Yes.
real name.
James is the.
I
official
actually didn't
name.
know that until we talked about it just before. That his
Oh.
real name, James.
Yeah, but it's like I don't know how names change throughout life. I think he's commented in one of the talks he did. It's like how you identify yourself as you're growing up is going to mean that like summoning you with the name that you had 5 years ago might not be the same. And I don't know all the other naming schemes he had in the series of like how he applies titles and names to characters is always interesting, especially the White Court to me, because calling them Wraith but spelling it not the word Wraith is always really fun. And I enjoyed that Madeline and Madrigal are fucking insane. And twins at that. So I was like, what do you think of the other naming schemes that they have in the Dresdenfall series?
Like what other schemes are you like thinking about here?
Well,
One that comes up a lot is the fact that everybody's got like the letter M, So, it's just interesting. Like, is that a subconscious tick, or is that a thing? Is there a reason why that exists in the universe? Is that just part of Jim Butcher's subconscious leaking that where for whatever reason
I
he's
think it's
always
on
there?
purpose. Most of his naming things.
well,
I think
sort
it's a
of.
conscious decision.
He said that it's kind of an unconscious drawing to the letter M, and he tries to stop it sometimes, but at other times there's just you couldn't be more direct if you wanted to in the fact that Harry's mother and daughter is both named Margaret, as well as Molly. I didn't know that Molly was a form of Margaret for years until proven guilty when Michael says her full name, and it's Margaret Amanda something or other Carpenter. It's just, why would you have all three important people named Margaret?
Margaret's a cool name, dude.
It is, but
It's like Martha in the DC universe. So, no. Sorry, I watched that on Tuesday, so now I'm thinking the same thing.
God.
What did you watch on Tuesday?
Batman versus Superman. Sorry, it's a spoiler.
Yeah, I didn't see
if
that
you
yet.
haven't seen it. So
I'm not
It's-
hyped about seeing it. I'm gonna
it's
see
not.
it whenever.
But when I saw it, I was like, "Mother of God, how did I not realize that?" So, talking about the importance of names, for people, I think people overplay a little bit the whole Maggie and Margaret thing in the whole mother-daughter essence, because I don't really feel like that's Jim making it important. Think about it from Susan's perspective. She was trying to honor Dresden's mom and be like, look, you're not going to get to know about your kid forever, hopefully. That's kind of her perspective on it. And so
It's too dangerous. I won't tell you ever, kind of thing.
right.
Or until
and-
until the daughter wants to make contact many years later.
Right, and so in my opinion, I feel like from her perspective, it was a way to be like, look, I wasn't trying to cut her out of your life or you out of her life so much as just it was too dangerous, and once everything dies down with the war, maybe we can revisit that. And so I think a lot of people are like,
I still
oh,
hate Susan.
yeah, well, and it's one of those bad decisions, but it's not necessarily a wrong decision, if that makes sense. So she did it for good reasons, but it was a bad decision, and it had a lasting impact in multiple ways, but it wasn't necessarily a wrong decision. So
I've always thought of that as like, it's not a good decision, but it's the right decision. And this
I mean, I can see
distinction
it.
of
I can
it
definitely see it from
is
her
really
side. It's
weird.
not that I don't agree with it,
Yeah.
but yeah.
I mean,
Oh,
on
that
Maggie, I mean, she has Margaret from her grandmother, but she has Angelica from her other grandmother. And then I just had the thought of Angelica, Angel, Uriel, and his bunch and Carpenters. Do you think that's going to be significant in any way? Anybody?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's just I don't know if he picked Angelica because of the Carpenters and the Angels and stuff, or if he just picked Angelica because whatever, it
She's his
sounded
angel.
good.
Well, it's not an uncommon practice to name children after their grandparents and kind of continue family lines and that sort of thing. So the whole Leslie thing, for example, or Margaret, those are things that happen in today's society. It's not like it's just a magical community. It's not just a Dresden Files thing. So naming, like we even discussed it for my child, for instance, if we were going to name him after one or both of the grandparents or the great grandparents in his case.
I'm naming after my great grandfather, for example, as well.
Right. So and it does become, Butcher doing it, right? Because it's his fiction and he wrote these things. So the fact that she was named Angelica, it probably didn't even occur to him until he was coming up with names for Maggie. And so maybe something is there. But when you're talking about, is that relevant? I think one of the things that I'm going to visit where my stance is on it for the names, and we're going to talk about that through the show, is that I don't think so. Like, think about true name magic and the way that it's dealt with other places in the world. And true names are kind of like, in some fantasies, you get a true name when you are born into the universe, so to speak. Like, dragons have true names because they've always been there, that sort of thing. In the Dresden Files, I think the name is more about what you identify with. And so that's why it's important that you had a nickname and you identify with Jimmy versus you now have named yourself Jim, even though that's not your name. That's what you identify with. And you even see some of that when he summons Mother Winter, for example, and that she doesn't go by those names anymore, but he wasn't wholly ignorant by choosing those names. And
He wasn't wholly stupid in using them, nor wholly wrong in using them.
Or something like that, yeah. And so that's the thing. Like, I think the names are more important by how you identify with them, and the fact that he gives them a name sort of teaches them that, So we'll talk about that a little bit more, but I think that's the more important thing. And I think it's the same thing with like hair at the end of the day. The reason why old hair samples don't matter is because you're not that person anymore. Like, it doesn't tie that to you. And I don't think it has to do so much with the cells in your body have changed as it has to do with, like that was a different haircut. So that's not how I visualize myself anymore. So.
Yeah, that seems. Speaking of dragons, Farowax, when was it he was coming back? Because I'm really looking forward to that.
I don't remember anything.
Is it Peakstarks? I'm thinking it was Peakstarks actually, but I'm not sure.
I think that's the fan theory that the dragons come back, and that's the event that makes it that the normals have to admit that there's magic out there. But I don't think that was ever actually confirmed.
I just remember him talking about at some point the Ferox will be back in X book, and I thought it was Peace Talks that he just represents himself as an, basically.
I don't remember anything specific about that. I'm sure Josh will tell me if there is anything about that.
Right. I don't have a source, but I wanted to say it was like book 18 because the part of the thing was I want to say in one of his AMAs or something he brought it up or it was asked of him, and like the dragons are magic incarnate, so they are literal forces of nature. They're not just really big lizards that breathe fire and shit, So like these are beyond D&D dragons. These are like...
I think it's mentioned that those dragons exist too, or did exist, but that these dragons, like Farowax, on a completely different level.
Right.
I mean, they're the ones that survive, so they're the oldest and most powerful and smartest and things like that. Josh did tell me of a forum theory that their names have to do with nature, like Pharaoh meaning like iron and earth, and Pyrofax meaning fire, obviously, and Stereothrax could be a version of Cirrus meaning air, and that could be part of the origins of the dragons, but I don't know anything else about that. That was just a forum theory. And another forum theory which he told me about was like in Mirror Mirror, maybe the alternative Harry summons our Harry by a slightly different version of his name, Like they identify it just a little bit different, so they put the different emphasis on it, and that's how you can summon that Harry. But
I mean, yeah, that's totally possible, I guess. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how Jim is gonna set it up, but I mean, that's one way to do it, maybe. I don't know how we don't know how time magic works. We've not really seen it at all before.
Yeah,
so we just don't know.
It's gonna be
I think it's going to be a big piece of the puzzle, and like maybe the targeting aspect. But I can't imagine that Butcher's not going to make some overblown ritual out of this thing, because you're pulling matter and life and soul from one universe into another. So it'll be interesting to see how that is.
And he better be pulled through a mirror, considering the title, and he said that mirrors are used as doorways for too many creepy things. But
speaking of creepy things and Harry's name, how about Chauncey almost having Harry's full name? I wonder if that's ever going to get brought up again.
That would be cool. Like, Alex was wanting Sean Zagros to come back. But actually, like, what happens if Harry gets summoned with his full name?
I think he has to. He'll just get pulled through. I don't think there's an option. I think he'll just be like, and then he's there. Just like they can channel any spell to him. It's basically a lock-on beacon through all defenses, everything. Maybe even through a threshold.
But I'd question.
Go ahead, Stark.
I was just going to say, but I'd question whether or not that's even possible. I mean, I did see something about a word of Jim regarding it, but I'm not familiar with that particular aspect that he's given. Because most of the time when it comes to summoning, there's a requisite that they have to be supernatural in basis. And while Harry is supernatural in many ways, he's more of a mortal with supernatural traits, or semi-mortal.
Right. So there's two things on that. One is that it's a huge deal in Stormfront, and it seems to taper off a little bit. I actually just went back through Stormfront. I've got my boss on it, and then I started listening to it again. Because that's where you get the whole, conjure by it at your own risk. Like, he brings that up like early on, and then he ends the book with that as well. But more importantly than that even is the fact that he mentions that Morgan almost nearly pronounced his name correctly when he encounters him at first in the book. And so, he mentions then that if Morgan knew his full name, he would basically be completely powerless to stop Morgan. Like, he could fight, he could raise some defenses, but ultimately it would give Morgan enough of an edge, at least, that it would be hopeless. But the second point is that we don't know yet still if he's going to continue down as the Winter Knight and become more Fey-like, or if he's going to eventually break those shackles. I personally think he might break them, but if there is
that one as well.
Right, if he does stay with it, it could push that whole he's more Fey than human at some point in some ways, and so summoning him by that name, that's he identifies with the Winter Mantle, so maybe you're summoning the mantle as much as anything. He just happens to be in possession of that at the time, so there's still a lot there, but clearly he's worried about it even as a junior wizard when Morgan almost nearly uses his name.
Yeah, I think there was a word of Jim out there, like, if you summon Harry, you can do that. You can summon him. But then you have to keep him there. And now he's pretty powerful in the fact that you'd have to, it's like restraining Mab. You have to fight to control him, just like you would have to do with fire. And so it's, conjure by your own risk. And it is interesting, the idea of maybe being bound by the summoning laws because he's slightly more fairy than not.
I think that he is definitely still. That's the point of both of the knights, is that they are, as also said, the mortal champions of the courts. That they have free will. They are mortals still. They are empowered somewhat by the fake court's magics, but they are still human. And I don't think he will be more fairy-like in that regard, because that would defeat the purpose. Which is why when Butters brings up, because I just listened to this, the first thing Harry does when he's back is like he wants to settle a debt with Bob. I don't know if that's just coincidence or a fairy influence on his personality, because I definitely think it can they can influence his personality, as we can see with the Winter trying to make him more carnal, more savage, more raw. But I don't think it will affect him as a being. That I think Uriel even hints to this, that he still has free will, whatever happens.
Right, he does, and the thing I try and keep in mind with Butters is like Butters sees a perspective of Harry, but it's not necessarily the truth of Harry, and so those things all do happen, and they kind of add to the whole Harry's a monster thing and blah blah blah. And I'm like, I don't necessarily subscribe to that, and I don't know if it depends on how much Harry does as well. But certainly Butters is like, you're not even human anymore. Like, for instance, you don't feel pain like people do, and you don't do this like people do, and the first thing you do is try and repay a debt. That's not necessarily solely fairy. I mean, Harry is also a human being, and he tries to live by a certain loyalty and code as well, and so he takes care of his people. Bob just happens to be one of his people, you know.
I definitely think that Butters' view is kind of skewed in the start of the book. It seems like he warms up to the fact that Harry is still Harry through the book, and by the end of it, they seem pretty chummy again. But he definitely seems like he's not looking at Dresden with the most friendly eyes.
Yeah, he had to be Batmaning for a while. It's hard on anybody. So, slight topic change. Harry gives names to all sorts of people. At some points, he's doing it to be friendly, like with Ivy, and some points with like the Octacongs, he's doing it in order to maintain his control and handle fear, because he can name them, he can think of them, and not be as disturbed by them. But Jim has said that Harry doesn't have special naming powers in something. It's just that he is a wizard who's very powerful, and that gives credence to the names he gives them, but other than that, it's not anything special. So,
well, like, I think that he's being slightly deceptive here, as Jim likes to be.
Very possible.
I think everyone, and maybe Harry has a bit more, but everyone has a certain power over names if you make it stick. If you give someone a name, like your parents gives you a name, and that name, other people have power over you when you grow up. Like when they use that against you, like Harry Blackstone Copperfield Dresden said the right way. That's a name he's gotten from his parents. So, and many other people. I think all names have power, and bestowing names upon others in the universe has power. Like calling Uriel by what is it? What is he called? Yuri.
Yeah.
And Ivy, and I mean, one of the clear cases, in my opinion, is Tutu. He is obviously growing in power by being bestowed upon a name and having these other fairies look up to him as well. He's kind of becoming, in a very miniature way, he's becoming a kind of like a map kind of figure in those like little tiny fairies, like a leader. He gets the power of his own little court.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, so they certainly respect him there. So I'm going back to my statement from earlier, and there's one wrinkle that I can definitely admit to. It's not completely defined, but I think when Harry gives people a name, there's two things why he says that it's more likely to stick. One thing is that he is a wizard, which is, to me, outside of the conjuring fire and making shit explode, becomes important in the fact that they are scholarly and they are wise and they share notes. And so when Harry names something that nobody's run into before, like Octacongs, people have a tendency to identify them as Octacongs. And then maybe eventually the Octacongs start identifying as Octacongs, and that's where that becomes a thing. Like Ivy, for example, she had never considered herself as anything other than the Archive. And then Dresden said, no, I'm going to give you a name. And she liked the name, so she stuck with the name. What had happened if she had rejected the name? You know, would it have stuck? So there's those aspects, and the only one that kind of breaks that, in my opinion, is the Yuri thing, because Yuri is actually afraid of Dresden shortening his name like that. And I don't know if, you know, in my reasoning, it's a little bit of a stretch, but maybe he's afraid of that because he's afraid of identifying like that, which could lead to him falling, for example, because he stops thinking about himself in God's plan, right, and he starts thinking about himself in his plan.
Yeah,
which
El
is
means of God, right? That's what
exactly.
L's
And so
are.
instead of being light of God, he would just be light. He would be his own light, and that's very Lucifer, right? Because Lucifer was the angel of light, and
Yeah.
so
And
He's
it
the
Harry
morning
calls him
star.
Mr. Sunshine, which is
right.
like kind of sidestepping, but getting to the same nickname almost. But actually, about Ivy, like maybe she accepted it because he said it's like Arc Ivy, like it's coming from what she already identified as. If he tried to name her Sarah or something, she probably would have rejected. It's like that's not who I am, but I am the Archive, and I could be Arc Ivy, and maybe that's why she got her name, you know.
It definitely gives her an option right there to feel more human, and I think she kind of latches onto that because she felt very cut off from humanity. And we gotta remember that while Ivy is immensely powerful, she is a human with this thing in her, just like kind of like Thomas is a human with the white court thing in him. Like the as I understand it, the white court vampires all have souls and free will, right?
Yeah, you think so? Yes.
I think it's covered in the RPG actually, because there the system is that if you lose free will, you can no longer be a player character, and you can play as a white court vampire.
Huh. Interesting.
So you can be a half-blooded red court, but if you kill someone and become full-blooded, you lose free will, and it will become an NPC, and you have to make a new character.
You lose free will because you can be controlled by someone else, or you.
Because red court
The
vampires are
bloodlust controls you.
Oh, but I mean, this is interesting when you compare it to like Ariana. Clearly had free will to do whatever she wanted, but there's.
Yeah, but
Hmm.
I mean, she kind of had free will, I guess. I mean, she had free will, but she's the way it's distinguished in the books is that monsters are a slave to their impulses, where humans have free will. We can choose to go against our impulses, where monsters can't.
That's interesting when it comes to the White Court. Like, Madeline would be described as a slave to her impulses. She feeds on everybody because she thinks that she should. But Thomas
she has the option to not do it. She could choose not to do it, whereas
Sure.
a red court vampire cannot choose to not kill people once they're red court.
But if they don't feed, then they go crazy. So they are driven to do it to a certain extent.
Yeah, but you can manage it like Thomas does, for example, where he does not kill.
Yeah, the intricacies of free will with this and with the RPG is interesting, and I don't know a whole lot about it, but we should really do the side-along podcast of us playing an RPG at some point.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Once you move, we might have time because I'll be out of school at least for a couple months. But the problem is when school starts again, we'll kind of be hosed.
Yeah,
I can DM.
That would be fun. Like, someone else can do it, and I don't have to be the director for once.
Yeah, but I DM a couple of sessions here with my friends as well. They don't like to do it, and I think it's quite fun being the storyteller.
Interesting. I'm going to get us back on topic. About the archive. I was
Right.
wondering, like, the story of Ivy, like, she didn't have a name because she was born when her mother died. But all of the other archives, they were able to be a person. They had their own name before they became the archive. So how is it going to affect Ivy getting her name from Harry and getting it after she had been the archive? I mean, the way that Lucio was saying is like she could be like unstable because she's getting to be a teenager and blah blah and hormones and teenagers.
Yeah, she was referring also to that other archives haven't before been very unstable. Case in point, Ivy's mother, who kills herself.
Yeah, because they needed to distance themselves from the issues
archive
and stuff.
entity.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's the intricacies of there is like we don't know how things are going to happen, but they are going to be coming back in peace talks, and we might find out more there.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Big Ivy fan. When she just holds off against how many is it, 10 Denarians, almost all by her lonesome. I was like, I didn't realize that she would. I know now she's powerful, but damn.
Yeah.
Right. She has centuries worth of technique and knowledge. Ultimately. So
that brings up a thought. Like she's clearly is she a wizard? She has great magical powers, and she's mortal. Is she a wizard with a archive thing in her, or is the archive granting her magical powers?
I like that about that. The point you made earlier with the White Court vampires, I think, is pretty apt to describe Ivy. I mean, she is her own person, but she is beholden to or as a host to the archive itself, which in many ways is a little bit like Bob. I mean, it's an entity of knowledge and information. So I think it's very akin to almost like a possession, like when Bob takes over Sue or takes over Mister. Mister's not, can't do magic or anything like that. Sue can't really do magic or anything like that. But because of the entity within, it gives the capacity to do so. The only difference being that Ivy actually has consciousness.
But with if you look at the example you have with Bob and taking over Sue or whatever, what about Butters? Like Butters, for example, has Bob to help him. He has all the theoretical knowledge, but he does not have the potential for magic. So Bob can help him with some stuff, but not there. He can't cast spells, whereas Ivy can. She can literally cast spells. She has the information. She has all the spells. She knows them, and she can use them. I'm just thinking, does that mean the bloodline from where they come, which also gives credence to the fact that usually the bloodline of wizards runs more through women than men? That bloodline is also a wizard bloodline. Is that why she can use magic?
I mean, it could be something about that, like being the archive, makes the potential that everyone has to do magic awaken, and therefore all of the bloodlines will eventually get that. But it could just be the archive needs to protect itself, and so Ivy has the ability of magic to be able to protect herself.
I mean, it might be why that specific bloodline inherits the archive is because it has a strong magical potential. That's why they can cast magic.
Yeah, it depends probably how it was created.
Right. It could be that I kind of lean more towards the fact that because it's the archive and it's a magical artifact in a sense, or a magical, spirit, for lack of a better word, that's where she's able to draw some of that strength. You're using the term wizard, but really more it's the fact that she can manipulate magic. I don't think, strictly speaking, she's a wizard. Because
she just kind of falls under the category, doesn't she? She's mortal and a magic user.
That's not what makes a wizard, though. So there's a differentiation between wizards and warlocks, for example. Wizards and sorcerers, but they use sorcerer and warlock interchangeably at times. And so I don't know if that is just the differentiation between an evocationist, like rogue wizard, or if that's the difference between like a mind-controlling rogue wizard. I'm not sure that distinction's clear to me, but I think she's able to at least draw upon magic, but that doesn't necessarily make her a wizard. She's something more than that. She's not a member of the White Council. So Kim Delaney had some magical talent. That doesn't make her a wizard. Molly has magical talent. I'm not sure she was ever a wizard. She was always just an apprentice. So maybe it's the difference between
that's more of a
Jedi,
title. I was more
Padawan and Knight, or something like that.
Yeah, those are titles. What I mean is that she is definitely on a she's definitely senior council or above level in terms of power.
Right.
She can probably rival the Winter Queens in power.
That might be a stretch, but she definitely is senior council level. Like he mentions that, as part of it in small favor during that fight scene. But yeah, I think it's important to differentiate it a little bit. So she's probably closer towards, the White Court example. I think fits a little bit better, and she's clearly a magic user of some kind, but I think of it more like, the archive itself is a battery. Like the way that I think about the archive is that it's basically a hard drive or a computer plugged into a person, and so it's magical in nature, so you've got magical energies, magical things, but it is distinct. Ivy, like, she's the case around the archive, but clearly that archive can come out and go to a different person. There's laws that govern that and all that fun stuff because of succession, but it doesn't, like, it's supernatural, but she's just a vessel, for instance.
I actually like my idea that the archive is one thing. I think maybe the archive could also be in someone who's just mortal, who would have incredible knowledge but no ability to use magic. I think maybe the reason, like I said before, that bloodline was chosen is because of the potential for magic. But maybe not. Well, maybe we'll probably never know. That's probably not going to come up. But I like that idea, and I see what you say. But I think that I just had that idea. And I think it actually fits quite well.
Right. It makes sense that it couldn't just be in any old person, that they'd have to have, a magical bloodline. But I think it's the difference between being like a Dresden, for example, and just being any old wizard.
I
I don't
think
know.
I just found a good analogy of it. It's like in Ghost Story, like the corpse taker needed a body that had enough room to be able to hold her talent. There's probably like it needed to be someone with magical talent to be able to withhold the archive and not be torn apart by it. So it's like there's definitely magical ability there, but calling it a wizard might be a bit ambiguous. And it's like
since wizard is actually more of a title within the White Council than it is what you are.
Yeah.
And corpse taker needed specifically someone who kind of mirrored their own talent, specifically, with Mortimer.
Yeah. Topic change, because I don't know how to segue it. Shut up, Justin. I see you laughing at me. I had thoughts about Bob. It's like in Deadbeat, Cowell owns Bob and possesses the skull and stuff, and then Cowell sets him down, and Harry starts calling Bob by his name and is able to wake up his personality. But shouldn't Bob still be in the possession of Cowell? So did Harry...
He's set down. He's not in the possession of anyone.
Well, he's still kind of like... You can like move him, you can stop holding Bob and still be in the possession of him. But I'm wondering if by Harry giving him a name, it's made Bob's personality permanent.
Certainly probably more... maybe the more dominant personality in Bob.
I mean, yeah, he explained it away that, like, Butters has a similar personality Bob because first impressions and all that, but maybe, like, 16-year-old Harry calling him Bob and be obsessed with boobs has made boobs a permanent part of his personality.
That always seemed reflective of Bob as an entity itself, though. I mean, it's been discussed at length how Bob is a reflection of whoever possesses him. Or, well, not in the spooky possessed, but, literal who owns him. And in that case, there's always been a reflection there. So I do agree that there probably is some permanence since he's been called Bob by Harry, because even when they refer to Kemmler, they just and Kyle, they just refer to him as like the assistant or the spirit. They never refer to him by name.
Which, like, did none of these people who owned him give him a name?
So to most of them, who were megalomaniacs. He was just a tool, a thing to be used. He wasn't a person. That's
kind of a good point, because I don't know, like the personality of Evil Bob, which I totally want to call Robert. It's like, yeah, it's like he always like the Master did this, and like he worshipped Kemmler, the Master, and it's like that's a lot of personality with that, and. How permanent is something like this?
I think that maybe that the reason he worships Kemmler is because like it's a reflection of who the person they take, and I'm sure Kemmler thought very highly of himself. If I were to guess.
Right. Yeah. So I think bringing it up that he's a tool, like I was going to make that comment as well, and maybe that's one of the main differences for Dresden and everybody else and why he gives them names is because he doesn't just see the archive as a tool. He doesn't just see Bob as a tool. He sees their, inner humanism or their inner, being, their inner self. So it's possible that Bob self-identifies to a point, but at the end of the day, he does mention that, he takes on the personality traits of whoever possesses him. And so, maybe it's the fact that, Harry is interested in boobs and that sort of thing, but he also talks about in the first two books how because he's a spirit, the physical world is so much more interesting to him because he doesn't have a body. Because I think Dresden makes some quip about, like, not everything's about boobs, and he's like, speak for yourself, you've got a body. So just one of those things. Same thing with morality, but he doesn't obsess over morality just because it doesn't make sense to him,
Yeah, I mean, what Jim has said is that the way Bonnie, it was born of Harry in his mind and a spirit and stuff. Like, that's the same thing that happened with Bob with Etienne the Enchanter. So at some point, Bob was really useless because he had all this information but none of the ability to put it together into meaningful ways. But if he was actually born of Etienne the Enchanter, did he not get a name from that? Like, because, I don't know, the way that Harry is naming Bonnie his daughter, is Harry really the first one to name him?
There's a lot of questions with that, especially with what happened during Deadbeat. I mean, we saw what can happen when Dresden or whoever owns Bob commands him to excise part of his personality. And, bringing up just very briefly the ideas about time travel and all of that, there's a lot that we might not really know what's going on with Bob. We don't know everything there is, which, granted, this is speculation, which is prime material for a podcast. But I think there's a lot more behind it than we can assess, if that makes sense.
Yeah. But, I mean, we are very limited in information we have about Bob. Do we even know where he got his original skull from?
Probably Etienne the Enchanter. But
where's that from? The Etienne Enchanter bit of
he's some guy in France in some 100 years ago. I don't know, but I think that's like Bob was with him during the times that werewolves are going crazy and blah blah. And it's just I think that's kind of the origin point, probably where he got.
Is that mentioned in the books? Because I just don't remember this.
It would. Well, the werewolves part is full moon for sure. Bob talks about you should have been there during France, and basically like I'm actually in the middle of full moon as well, so that's pretty recent. So he does talk about that. I don't remember him mentioning Eddie and the Enchanter then, so it may be much later where he gets named. I want to say maybe Cold Days or something like that, where it starts to come up again because he has switched over to Butters, but I don't know. I don't remember exactly where it.
I just don't remember Etienne and the Enchanter being mentioned at all.
Yeah, I remember it, but part of the reason why I say Cold Days is because we finally find out why Bob's so afraid of fairies, because they realize what he knows about their immortality on Halloween and things like that.
Well, not just fairies, any immortal being, but yeah.
Well, Mab, because Mab knows, but
right. He's specifically afraid of Mab and going to fairy, so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but he's okay with Leah. It just, I don't know where Etienne got mentioned. I know that Jim has mentioned him several times, but I could have sworn it was in Full Moon. And if you haven't seen it, then I'm not sure.
I just don't remember. It makes sense it's in Full Moon because that's one of the books I've read or listened to the least.
You heathen.
The first three are just not that great.
You heathen.
They're still good.
First ghost story, now the first three books. Oh man. Oh
yeah.
man.
We need to get back to the ranking.
I mean, even Jim kind of says that he does not he's not very proud of the first three books. I think they're good, but I just prefer not. I prefer skipping them usually when I go through them again.
Yeah.
According to the wiki, it's chapter 7 of Full Moon, so I probably just wasn't paying very close attention. It's probably intermixed with the whole Inquisition and dealing with vampires during the 1400s or whatever it was. So that where he gets all his werewolf knowledge from.
Yeah. All right. I feel vindicated. It's like we were mentioning Toot earlier, and it's like as he's getting bigger, his name is getting
Toot.
longer.
I mean, please, can you use the general's full name? Major General Toot Minimus.
Yes.
Oh, it's way longer than that, isn't it? So.
I think that's his full name, isn't it? Major General Toot Minimus.
In Cold Days, he gives his full title and everything. So.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was that. It's He drops the Minimus every now and then, but when he introduced himself to Lacuna, who is oh so pretty, he says, "I'm Major General Toot Toot," and it's kind of indicative that he has truly accepted that as his name and identity.
Oh, he's very happy about his titles.
Yes. How much of him getting bigger is Harry giving him power? Specifically Harry, and not the other Fae that might be following his orders all the time. Like,
that also happens because of Harry, because he is providing the pizza.
Yes, but I don't know, it's like how much of personal.
I don't know how much power Harry is giving him, but I don't think Harry's taking my power, giving it to you. But I think by giving him this title and giving him this responsibility over other fairies, that has granted him power.
I think it's the pizza. I think the pizza is what's giving him power.
So what you're saying is we should all eat more pizza and then we'll just get more powerful?
Well, we're not pixies.
You don't know me. I could be a pixie.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah, but what about like Lacuna, who doesn't eat pizza? She hates pizza.
She gets power from vegetables. That's why she's not as strong as Major General Tutu.
Yeah, but she kicks his ass
Tutu's too busy looking at her pretty face.
before she takes off her helmet.
You knew. The Toot can take anyone. That's just how it is.
Yeah, speaking of which, Lacuna means gap, and she hates things like pizza and candy. So the crazy fan theory is that she's the tooth fairy, and she hates having.
I don't know if she's the tooth fairy. Maybe the Tooth Fairies is a line of pixies, and she would definitely belong to that.
Yeah, but like she's mentioned, like what she said to Harry and Cold Days was, "By some I am called Lacuna, and so you can call me that," and implies that she has other names, and maybe one of them is Tooth Fairy.
Have you heard James's voice for Lacuna?
Yes.
I can't even do it. It's like, by some I'm called Lacuna.
Oh my god, that's actually really good. But,
that voice. It's like, and I was like, I think I like her as a character. I think she's funny, but the voice he does, I'm just like, oh, it's cutting through my ears. But it could be. I actually think it makes sense if it's a whole line of pixies that are the Tooth Fairy. That makes practical sense if there are Tooth Fairies. That's a lot of pixies. So they are able to go all around the world. They're everywhere to collect the teeth. If there actually are Tooth Fairies, I think it makes a lot of sense that there are a lot of them.
Why do they want tooth in exchange for money? It's like,
I don't know.
Is that ever explained? It never made sense to me as a kid. But.
Maybe
there's probably some old folklore.
It's a little bit more valuable than blood. It doesn't exactly evaporate, and they can use it for all sorts of crazy magics.
Oh, that's a good point. Wow.
Which is why I always want my teeth back from the dentist whenever I go and get one pulled, as rare as it may be.
Yeah, I was like, look at him. Yeah, I don't know if you're a wizard or something, dude. Can I just have my teeth back, please? Thank you.
Yeah, it's like they took my teeth away. Now I'm getting kind of nervous. On slightly other smaller names, Fitz from Ghost Story. Fitz literally means bastard. So, like, Henry Fitzroy is the royal bastard. It's like that's kind of part of the idea that he could be the child of MacFin and Tara West. He's just the bastard of them, but yeah, they never got married.
So why? Why does Fitz have any relation to that? Because maybe I just hate Ghost Story that much, but that seems like the thinnest theory I've ever heard. Like, trust me, I'm waiting for MacFin and Tara West kids to show up because, Butcher has a way of not just letting these things drop. Like, we're going to have to see another Luke Garou at some point because, that curse doesn't end. It's stated very clearly in Full Moon, and then she seems to be pregnant at the end, so everybody's kind of been waiting for it. But why does Fitz have to be that kid? And why would...
time frame? Because he's just about the age that would make sense.
I don't think so. I think
I don't buy it. Yeah.
His name Fitz because if it's a bastard, an orphan, it's that's why.
That is very possible. It's just like, you don't have parents, you're an orphan, I'm going to name you Bastard. And that's very possible.
Here's the thing. So in the entire time that he was with What's-His-Nuts crew, not one time was there a full moon where he would just kind of went Luke Garou and ate everybody? Like that, Come on. That's like, I'm a walking nuclear weapon, but I don't know it. It's just, for some reason, I haven't gone off yet.
But if, like, MacFin and his curse interacting with Tara West and her abilities, how much is that going to change anything? And also, we don't know how young anything with MacFin starts. Maybe it starts at puberty instead of, your newborn is going to react to the full moon.
We don't know.
It seemed like the curse was relatively specific, but I mean, it's not like it says, on your 14th birthday you turn into a werewolf and eat your family.
On the eve of your 14th birthday, by the light of the first full moon, like that.
Right, but it's clear about it basically being an unbroken line. So.
The whole thing with ongoing curses, though, like for example with the plate and the baseball stadium, that has to be constantly refreshed. And the blood, and Margaret had to bind her own bloodline to her curse on the White King. I wonder how this curse was made permanent, or was that maybe that was just not a consideration for Jim back then?
I think
could be the
phrasing. I mean, if you've gotten to that point, Justin, correct me, but it's like it was sent to go until the end of days, probably binding to its own bloodline. So MacFinn's bloodline entirely is the one that's keeping it going perpetually.
But how can someone else bind it to another bloodline? I thought Margaret could only do it to affect another person because it was powered by her bloodline.
Well, so there's a couple of things going on here. First of all, the curse wasn't done by a wizard; it was done by a Catholic priest. So the rules are different. So that it actually Dresden and Chauncey remark on that a little bit. So because that comes up during his interview with Chauncey, which is one of the last things that I listened to. And Chauncey's like, look, I'm not responsible how the other team plays, basically. So there's very likely other rules at play there.
I can't believe that Uriel and Team White God would do that.
Well, most likely this Catholic priest is just going to have to suffer the judgment and consequences of his actions.
I guess but if he was, we've never seen priests having specifically powers related to them.
Well,
like
there's
their
Fort Hill.
faith. There's talk about faith in Fort Hill, and you can feel his faith as a magical thing, but it's never been utilized for anything really, has it? We've never seen faith magic really being used.
Michael,
yeah,
he uses the hell out of faith magic. So
and
you don't see
that, yeah, but that's more to repel evil spirits. We've never seen how Dresden goes, Frago, fire.
Right. We've never seen a D&D-esque cleric throwdown or anything like that, but the rules of magic do seem to be different for them. So he keeps that aspect of D&D where he talks about it when Michael utters a prayer or when Fort Hell's around, that he feels a magical presence, but not necessarily the magic he's used to in the magic. So he interprets faith as magic because he's a wizard and that's what he knows. But it's very likely that there's some different power, which is one of the things that D&D does to kind of keep those two schools separate, where there's divine magic, which is sourced differently, and then there's, arcane magic. They're both magic, they're both supernatural forces, but they're not necessarily interchangeable. So it sounds like St. Patrick, for example, would be one of those, call down fire from the gods type of clerics, potentially. Or maybe he just specialized in curses. And one of the things about the Dresden Files, the more I read it, the more I kind of realize there are very few true heroes in the Dresden Files. That seems to be one of the things he sticks to very well. So, Michael is largely one of those guys, but in The Warrior, you almost see him not be.
Yeah. I was gonna say that where his daughter is kidnapped. I was,
right.
And I was all for Michael going down a dark path. I was like, yeah, Michael. Get him, Michael!
Right. And so even Fort Hill has that shady past, and, Dresden blurs the line plenty of times, especially in...
blurs the line? God. He just walks back and across all the time on that line.
I think I'm thinking... Is it Death? Yeah, it's Death Mass. I was blurring Death Mass and Deadbeat. That's why I got stuck. So, but yeah, so he definitely, Dresden, in my mind, he's a hero, but he does plenty of non-heroic things, and that's where he winds up that anti-hero style. He's definitely the gray, especially stack him up next to Sonya and Shiro and Michael. Those are good guys.
They are lawful good.
Right. The priests kind of can get away with blurring the line. Dresden blurs the line. The council, they all fight dirty. So the world spends a lot more time in the gray areas than it does, I think, in the white and black.
Ebenezer drops a satellite on the line.
Yeah.
Well, and he's the Black Staff in general, so yeah, Chichen Itza for crying out loud.
You picked the wrong team, boys.
But this white people of the Knights of the Cross, Ebenezer's title is Blackstaff, which is suitably terrible, I think. But Shiro, his name literally means white. Shiro is the color white. So it's just these are the white guys, and then we have the White Council, who shouldn't be called white anyway, but whatever. And
they should be named the Gray Council. They're kind of ambiguous.
Yeah.
The White Council.
Well, and to me, the White Council is like the Jedi, you know. So yes, they're the force of law, but they're not necessarily a force for good. And I think a lot of people, including the Jedi themselves, lose sight of that. Like if you, not that it matters anymore, but back before Disney bought them and there was an expanded universe that you could read, you
I
know,
mean,
the
the
Jedi
expanded
were.
universe still matters. People, I mean, never invested a lot of
It's not
time into it,
not
but it's
canon
not
anymore.
canon. But
Yeah,
it's still,
so
it's what is it called now? It's called it has its own name.
I don't
There's
know. What I was
Legends.
what
Star
I
Wars
was
is
going to bring
Legends.
up was that, you know, they were mediators. They weren't necessarily like they were there to maintain the status quo, not to make sure that dictators didn't take over. So that, and I think that's the White Council. They're there to defend humanity against the dark, so to speak, but they get to cheat and bend the rules, and they're not necessarily always the good guys. You can see that in Langtree. If he was the good guy, he would probably try and remediate people instead of just chop their heads off.
Yeah, especially like wanting to viciously go after Molly just because Harry pissed him off. But, I realized something as we've been talking, that when we were talking about like Jimmy versus Jim, we kind of completely skipped over Will and Georgia, and the fact that Will went from Billy to Will, and his like personal character growth as being represented by his name. And yeah, I feel compelled to point that out.
That part always bothered me in the book. Like it seemed like I understand the logic behind it, but it always seemed very kind of odd. It's just like if you called somebody Dave for his whole life, and then you just in a very serious tone, David. It's like what? That's oh, okay. We're gonna go. We're gonna run with this then. All right.
What did I do? What?
Well, I thought the thing was that people had been calling him Will for a long time, but Harry lagged behind calling him Billy because he always thought of him as a kid that needed to be protected. And like Georgia always called him Will for several books up until then, and that was Harry like dealing with it. Like, okay,
Does Harry accepting that he
can
is
make his own choices.
adult who can make his own choices and choose whether or not he needs protection from things?
So it's like Bill to Will. He chose his own name, and it just took a while for Harry to accept it and use it.
What is his given name? Is it Will or Bill?
William.
William. And why is it he they call him Bill?
Because Cockney people make weird names out of something. That's how you get Peggy out of Margaret, because Cockney people. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's the same thing with James, Jim, Jimmy. You know, so Will, Bill, William. I want to say there's another one even. That's just how the English
James, Jim,
language
Jimmy
does.
all starts with the same letter at least.
Yeah.
Right. It does get weird, but there's a path there in an evolution. I mean, that's like Richard and Dick. I'm not sure how that comes across, but there is a reason why that's the case. So.
From what I saw, it's like specifically Cockney people do this a lot. They'll like make adjacent sounds in their sentences, and it gets stuck as a thing. So you get Richard, you get Rick, and then Dick sounds like Rick, so you get Dick. And that, yeah.
This must be an American thing.
No, English.
No, it's an English thing. Yeah. So William's an English name.
Non-continental.
Okay, well, you can split hairs, but they're all fucking European as far as we're concerned. So it's a you thing.
The UK is part of Europe, but it's not on the continent. I just want to point that out. You know, they're over there. We're over here.
It's what was Binder's full name? Like Ernest Armand Tingwhistle.
Yeah.
It's like
with a name like that, I know. No wonder he picked. Like that's who says that?
I think it's Murphy that says like his name like that. No wonder he goes Binder, and Harry says that Binder was actually given to him by the White Council because he binds.
Yeah.
And maybe just stuck with it. So I wonder.
I actually like him as a character. He's up there with as one of my favorites.
Yeah.
So one thing we didn't really get into too deeply here for the Lash fans, you know, Lashiel, talking about names in the suppositions / he all but tells us something for once in the fact that naming her Lash kind of broke her out of being the shadow of the demoness. Like she still was.
Her own identity?
Right. She identified with that enough to eventually stop trying to corrupt him and then eventually saving him. So
Yeah, I mean that's definitely one of the clear-cut cases of where we see the names have power effect. It breaks, but that's also like one of the things that bothered me with Lash, the real Lashiel, the way she was like, "You denied me, scorn lover," and I mean, how does she even know? I felt like the entity that was unique and separate from her died, and did. How did the information come back to her?
it's not a big leap from I implanted a shadow on you and you were supposed to come pick up the coin and that never happened. So clearly you did something to thwart my
She
plans
knows
or my
about
corruption.
the daughter as well.
I think somewhere is that all of the information that Lash had was the same information that Lashiel had. Like what Lash learned would go to Lashiel. They were connected in that way.
But I just thought once she became her own thing, her own entity, that line would be severed. That's kind of what I assumed, but I guess not, because she even knows that the sacrifice created as a daughter.
Yeah, it's ambiguous as to when the connection from Lash to Lash not existing fully happened, because is Bonnie made of the remains of Lash, or is it a fully new entity? And it's still a little ambiguous.
I think she's a fully new entity made by the sacrifice.
Well, does Bonnie have all of the information that Lash did?
I think that's strongly hinted in.
Then that really implies that she's like the cannibalized remains of Lash instead of a fully new entity. And all of
perhaps.
this, meh.
Well, it's not much different than the way that human embryos form anyway. You've got half of your mom and half of your dad, and they make a new baby. And so, there's probably not enough of Lash left over to make a full entity, but, that's her, like you said, it's kind of the remainder. Cannibalism makes it a little dark and creepy for my taste, so I'm trying not to use that word, but it is sort of like that, because she didn't inject new material so much as she was the material, so.
Yeah, so the combined essence of Lashiel and Harry that was Lash, bait of Harry's form as well, kind of becoming the new entity. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, man, I think Justin put it in a very good way that Lashiel sacrifice and the remaining energy, whatever that is, was kind of like the egg, and then they were in Harry's mind and then made a baby. Harry's mind was the sperm. I don't know. It's very weird situation.
Well, Harry's mind was the womb because Harry was pregnant.
That's probably a more accurate thing. It was his big dome and her little personality, and yeah, who knows? It gets weird and creepy, and then he was a mom, so he's a mom and a dad.
It's so patriotic of me to think that he had to be the non-womb. Obviously, I had to be more gender fluid.
Stark, did you have comments on angels?
Yeah, the thing with angels that I've been mulling around, and Lash kind of reminded me about it, was that when we mentioned earlier about Uriel having that strong reaction to when Harry Shorn's
You need to kill the camera. You're lagging.
Apologies there.
Yeah, you sounded fine without the camera. I just noticed that you were lagging and then I saw the camera.
All right, no worries.
Yeah.
What it got to me was I realized how important names are with angels. I mean, when Harry's talking to Bob about Soulfire and he talks about how angels are nothing but soul, it made me think of how their individuality and at the same time their collectivism is so tied to faith and to their name. I mean, we see that with Lashiel. I mean, her sigil is so important to her identity, marking Harry as it does. So I think with Uriel reacting that way is that it's like an abomination to just change that. And we see a reflection of that with Lash and Lashiel, where she doesn't really care all that much about her name being shortened because she's already fallen. I mean, you can't really make more of an abomination of it, arguably from certain perspectives, than it already is.
I can see that.
Yeah, I definitely agree, because one of the things that's important for those of faith and those on, the White Gods team, for lack of a better way to put it, is that being tied to, the deity is the important factor there. They are tied to his will. They do his will, that sort of thing. The fallen angels, pretty much what you have to do to be fallen is assert your own will and try and do your own thing. And so for them, the of God part is less important. And it's mentioned in the notes that we didn't really bring up either, but that Magog doesn't have an eel part, but Magog, it's a different root from a different culture anyway, from my understanding. So, but yeah, telling somebody who is a card-carrying member still of the White God's army that he's just light instead of light of God, it could probably be the whole, wait a minute, I'm not a deserter, I'm still on the home team, I still want that connection, maybe. So
Yeah,
there's also.
Oh, keep going, Stark.
I was just going to say that there's also what you mentioned, Justin, about Magog not having, the classic eel at the end. I'm sure you guys probably are well aware of this, but there's a really long and twisted history with the different names for various angels, and certain angels being mixed in with other ones, some being excommunicated from the religions just flat out. So I get what you're saying, but that's just one caveat that I personally would think is worth mentioning.
I mean, I was thinking of the names of the angels and Denarians a while ago, and it's like the Denarians always have the EL ending, except for Magog. I can't think of any of the others that don't, like Anduriel, Imariel, Lashiel. It seems like they're more stuck in the idea of something of God than the angels did, like Uriel does, yes, but Raphael, Michael, and who's the other guy? There's some of the others. It's like you can kind of see it, but it's a little different sounding, and just kind of interesting.
Michael doesn't have an eel, and Magog doesn't have an eel. I don't know if there's anyone else that I can remember.
You can kind of see it, like AL instead of EL, like just like slightly different conjugation of the same words. But
I don't know. There's so many angel names. Like I've watched too much Supernatural. They all blur together.
Right. Yeah, I mean, so if you go Supernatural, you got Castiel, which of course fits the theme, but Lucifer doesn't. So that's always thing. Like, I don't remember. I want to say that he actually had an angel name, and Lucifer was the name he took after he fell, but I don't remember 100%. It's been a while since I dug into that.
Well, you can dig into it more and report back, because I'm always interested in this shit. Also, I had a very interesting thought about the abilities of Anduriel, because as shown in Skin Game, he or she can listen into everything. There's a very distinct possibility that Nicodemus/Anduriel has Harry's name and might be able to do something with that in book 20.
Did they mention whether or not it could go beyond thresholds?
I don't remember.
I think what is it's not spelled out exactly, but what it's alluded to is that unless someone like Map or someone else very powerful specifically blocks Anduriel, he can always listen in through every shadow there is.
Well, we have evidence that Harry at least is playing on the idea that it does, because he doesn't tell things to Murphy in her own home behind her very solid threshold. And the same thing with Michael in his home. He's playing it so close to the chest.
Michael probably, and Murphy, but especially Michael's family must have one of the strongest thresholds there is.
Yes, so it's like Harry at least is acting on that ability, and I think they almost mentioned that if you write it down, Anduriel can also see it or know of it, and so it's with that capability, I'm hoping that it's like a Chekhov's gun.
Shadow, right? Maybe if you can look here through shadows.
Mm-hmm. Then I don't know, the Chekhov's gun that might fire, hopefully, because that would be interesting for Harry to be summoned by Nicodemus.
If humans can be summoned at all, we don't actually know.
Mm.
They can be used to channel things at the person with the name, but I'm not sure it can be used to summon. I don't know.
And we'll have to find out more probably in Mirror Mirror and various AMAs if we ever get the chance to actually ask a question. So
Well, we're gonna have a chance at some point. We just have to
yeah,
schedule it. I'm not sure we'll get an answer though.
that's always
Except
possible.
maybe he'll do a "I'm not gonna tell you." That might be what we get.
Do we have anything else to mention about names? Anybody?
Let's see. Was there anything left on the spreadsheet? There's the name of You Walks Behind.
Oh yeah, it's like pointed out to me that like the three-eyed junkie in Stormfront is able to see He Who Walks Behind on Harry, and it's like Harry's been branded with the name of an outsider that way.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows how that's going to actually interact with things, other than it is like the darkness that other people can feel on Harry. It's not entirely his own, but that's huge.
I think that's a really good point. That brings up a whole lot to every time he's done a soul gaze with somebody, and they look at him with mixed reaction of like awe and horror at the same time. So that contrast actually makes a whole lot of sense between having a nightmarish outsider behind him, but also how good of a person Harry is. Overall speaking, I'm not nitpicking about things like what he did to any of the characters in Death Masks, but just.
When are we gonna know what people see? That's what I want to know.
Well, I figure at some point he's gonna soul gaze Murphy, and we'll find out. But who knows? There's also like maybe in Mirror Mirror, he looks at himself in that way because they're different entities, and we get to find out that way. Or maybe he was gonna drag that out up until the last book.
He's just never gonna deliver. He's like,
Yeah.
I just wrote awe and stuff. I never knew what to put in there, so I just got no, I'm not gonna do it.
Like maybe he wrote himself in a corner of like, I don't know how to describe this. I'm just not gonna.
Yeah,
it's possible.
It's kind of like how is it Rhinebuck's Fall in the Sherlock TV show, where they're like, if you've seen that.
Mm.
Have you seen the Sherlock BBC TV show?
Just a little bit.
Okay. Anyone mind spoilers?
Well, we're full spoilers on Justin Files, so go ahead.
Yeah, but do you mind the spoilers? I won't spoil. I don't want to spoil Sherlock for any of you if you haven't seen it.
Meh.
Justin, we need verbal consent.
It's not a big thing on my list, so I'm not worried about it.
Okay.
Go for it. I hate the show.
Whoa. Okay. Anyway, the thing that happens is that basically Sherlock jumps off a roof, falls down, hits the ground, and is supposed to be dead. But at the end of the episode, we see him watching John over his grave, and then the episode ends, and then there's a huge season gap, and there was so much hype, and when they finally come back, they never explain it. They show a lot of theories, a lot of fan theories, but it's never told how he survived.
Right. If you're familiar.
You just cut off there, Justin. If you're familiar, and then
yeah, my button was click happy. So anyway, if you're familiar with the source material, that's something that happens at least to Moriarty in the original books. I want to say they both fell.
That's actually I think the book, the story is actually called Rhinebuck's Fall, like the episode name.
Right.
They both fall down and are supposed to be dead, and then it turns out Sherlock is not. I'm not sure if Moriarty ever returns in the books, but Sherlock does.
Okay, I'm going to take this that we're talking about Sherlock more than Dresden now that we are done talking about names, and I should close out the episode. If you have anything else comments, then we can do that. But other than that, you can find everything at justinfilespodcast.com. You can email us at justinfilespodcast@gmail.com. You can check out everything of Broken Jars at brokenjars.xyz, and we're like 42 is always going. And next week I'm doing the first high fantasy podcast of fantasy and sci-fi and how to write it, and I'm so excited.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, I just need you to do a soundtrack of my life, Andreas. But that should be it. Say bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Sayonara.